Welcome to Alter Health, the epigenetic code. This is where we talk about the science of how your life shapes your genes and how your body can change when you change the conditions around it. Real stories, real science, real answers. Let's go. There was a moment about 6 weeks into my training where I sat at my desk and started to cry. Not because I was sad, because I was angry, furious actually. I had just finished a module that explained in clean clinical terms exactly how chronic stress shifts gene expression in the body, exactly which genes get loud, what happens to mitochondria when cortisol stays elevated for years, how sleep deprivation rewires the immune system, and how nutrient deficiencies that we now know are extremely common can quietly disable repair mechanisms in cells that are already under genetic strain. Every single thing I learned in that module described with surgical precision the life my husband and I had been living for 2 decades. Every single thing. As if someone had handed me a manual titled How to Wake Up a Dormant Disease in a Vulnerable Body, and I had been following that manual without knowing it existed. And here's what made me cry. None of this was hidden information. None of it was alternative medicine or fringe. The papers I was reading were published in mainstream peer-reviewed journals by serious researchers at serious institutions. The science was solid, abundant, and had been there for years. I had spent 6 years of dental school. I had spent 4 years specializing. And I'd been a practicing doctor for over 20 years. And nobody in any classroom or any continuing education course I had ever attended had taught me any of this. Not at a level where I could actually use it. Not at a level where I could have looked at my own husband and recognized what was happening, or my own health and body. That was the moment I understood that the problem wasn't a lack of knowledge. The problem was that the knowledge had not made it into the rooms where people are taken care of. And once I understood that, my work, the work I do today, became inevitable. This is Alter Health, the medicine nobody told you about. And I'm Dr. Nicola Schmitz. Today, I want to take you inside what I learned. Let's go. Let me set the scene first. The course I signed up for was a 6-month intensive training in epigenetic coaching. A combination of genetics, biochemistry, nutrition, lifestyle, science, nervous system regulation, and the practical application of all of this to real human bodies. I was working full days at the practice, so I was studying at night, late at night. The house was quiet and I was at the kitchen table with my laptop, my notes, my coffee, and the same lamp I had used the night I found the diagnosis. The same chair, the same cup, the same time of night. Except this time, I wasn't searching for what was wrong, I was studying what could be different. And I want to tell you something honest about that period. I was, in many ways, the most exhausted I've ever been. I was running a practice, caring for my family, managing a household, and now adding 3 to 4 hours of advanced study to every single night. By any reasonable measure, I should have collapsed. But I didn't. Because for the first time in years, I had a real reason, not the kind of reason you talk yourself into, a real reason that lived in our stomach. And the reason was him. Still healthy enough that we had a window of time to act before things changed. I couldn't afford to be tired. I could be tired later. Right now, I had a window. The course was structured around a simple but radical idea. And the idea was that the body is not a fixed machine. It is a responsive system. Every cell in your body is constantly making decisions every second based on the information it gets from its environment. The information includes the food you eat, the air you breathe, the sleep you get, the stress you experience, the chemicals you are exposed to, the emotional climate you live in, the relationships you have, the way you move, the way you breathe. All of that information is read by your cells. And your cells respond by activating certain genes and quieting others. Not in a vague way, in a measurable, biochemical way. There are markers we can see. There are pathways we can map. And once you understand that, you understand that disease is rarely just bad luck. Disease is very often a body that has been receiving a particular kind of information for a long time and is finally responding to that information in a way we can see. That is a sentence that sounds abstract until you apply it to a person you love. Then it becomes the most concrete thing in the world. Now let me tell you in plain language what I came to understand about my husband, about why his gene had switched on when it did, about why the doctors had been right that the gene existed, but had been completely wrong that there was nothing we could do about it. My husband was born with a gene that, under certain conditions, can cause the nerves that control the muscles to slowly stop working properly. He had carried this gene since birth. The gene was there. The gene was quiet for almost 4 decades of his life. The gene was quiet, which means a question is hiding inside that fact. And the question is the most important question in modern medicine. Why was it quiet for so long? And why did it become loud? Conventional medicine, the way we're usually taught, has a very simple answer to that question. The answer is, it just happens. Diseases manifest when they manifest. Sometimes early, sometimes late. We do not really know. It is partly genetic, partly random. Epigenetics has a very different answer. Epigenetics says that genes do not switch on or off randomly. They switch on and off in response to the conditions of the body. So if a gene that has been quiet for almost 40 years suddenly becomes loud, the right question is not, why is the gene loud? The right question is, what changed in the body? What conditions shifted enough to wake the gene up? And when I started looking at my husband's body and our life with that lens, the answer was right there. It was not even hidden. First, chronic stress. Not the kind of stress that lasts a week, the kind of stress that lasts for decades. The kind of stress that comes from running 2 businesses, raising 2 children, maintaining a property, sleep deprivation, no recovery, no real downtime. That kind of stress keeps cortisol elevated. Constantly elevated cortisol does specific things to the body. It dampens immune repair. It interferes with mitochondrial function, which is how your cells make energy. It increases inflammation, depletes specific nutrients faster than you can replenish them. And critically, it changes the chemical environment around your DNA in a way that makes vulnerable genes more likely to be expressed. Second, sleep. He was sleeping 5 to 6 hours per night for years on end. The body does most of its repair during deep sleep. The brain clears toxic metabolic waste during deep sleep. The nervous system resets during deep sleep. Hormones that regulate growth and recovery are released during deep sleep. Take that away systematically for a decade or two, and you do not just feel tired, you corrode at the cellular level. The damage accumulates. The repair never catches up. Third, nutrition. We ate well by ordinary standards. We were not eating fast food, but we were eating in rushed, fragmented ways, often standing up, often between appointments, often without paying attention. We were also missing certain very specific nutrients that I now know are crucial for nerve health, muscle health, for mitochondrial energy production. Some of those nutrients are extremely hard to get from a normal Western diet, even a healthy one, because the soils are depleted, the foods are processed, and the requirements of a stressed body are higher than the requirements of a calm one. Fourth, no nervous system regulation. None. Zero. We didn't have any practices that brought us out of fight or flight. We didn't meditate, we didn't breathe consciously, we didn't have time in nature without an agenda, we didn't have unstructured time with each other. Our nervous systems were running in chronic alarm mode for decades, and the body cannot heal in alarm mode. The body can only survive in alarm mode. Fifth, environmental load. Pesticides in food, plastics in everyday life, low quality water, indoor air, the small chemical exposures that everyone now lives with and most people do not think about. Each one is small. The cumulative load over years is not small. Now, here's the thing I want you to really hear. Every single of those factors on its own is something most modern people deal with. None of them on their own would necessarily cause a serious disease, but all of them together, layered over a body that happened to carry a vulnerable gene, became the perfect environment to wake that gene up. It wasn't bad luck. It wasn't random timing. It was a slow, predictable accumulation of conditions that any cellular biologist could have looked at and said, yes, this body is going to express its weak point. The only question is which weak point and when. In our case, it was his nerves. In another body, in another marriage with the same lifestyle, it would have been autoimmune disease, fertility problems, burnout, early stage neurodegeneration. The body breaks where it is genetically softest, when the environment becomes hostile enough. And once I understood that, I understood the work I needed to do. The work was not to fight the gene, the work was to change the environment. to remove what was loud and replace it with what is quiet. To take a body that was being told every day you are unsafe, you are starving, exhausted, and start telling it instead you are safe, nourished, and you can rest. To change the information being read by his cells. I didn't know yet whether the gene would respond. Nobody could promise me that, but I knew that we had nothing to lose by trying. So we started, slowly, methodically. I didn't throw 100 changes at him at once. That never works. People rebel, bodies rebel. We picked the highest leverage changes first. Sleep was first, both of us, non-negotiable. We started going to bed at the same time, protected 8 hours, made the bedroom dark, removed screens. We stopped eating late, and within about 3 weeks, both of us were sleeping deeply for the first time in years. I hadn't realized how shallow my own sleep had been until I had real sleep again. Stress was second, or rather, the conditions that were producing the stress. We started talking about whether the practice, the house, the schedule, the entire structure of our life was something we actually wanted, or something we had inherited from a younger version of ourselves who thought success looked a certain way. That was a longer conversation. Nutrition was third. We started eating at the table together, real food, specific nutrients targeted at his body's needs, certain supplements that the research showed were important for nerve and muscle support, and that he was clearly low in. I was tracking everything. Symptoms, energy, mood, sleep, pain, the tremor. I had a notebook. I'm still that kind of person. And here's something I want to be careful about because I do not want to overpromise. The first weeks didn't produce miracles. I want to be honest with you. The first weeks produced small, subtle improvements. We slept better, so we had more energy. That caused that we were less irritable, and so we also were less irritable with each other. These are not exciting changes. They are not the kind of thing you would call recovery. But they were the first signs that the system was responding to different inputs. The bigger signs came a little later, over months, not weeks. Pain was fading, muscle pain and cramps. The blood values, the two that had gone through the roof, started come down. Not back to normal at first, but coming down instead of climbing, for the first time in many years. The tremor, which had been a slow background presence in our lives for years, became less frequent and less intense. These were the kind of changes that the medical system would never have seen because the medical system was not measuring them. The medical system was waiting for the disease to progress to the next clinical stage. We weren't waiting. We were watching the signals every day, and the signals were turning around. And one evening, a few months into all this, my husband said something almost in passing that I want to share with you. He said, "You know, I feel different. Not just better, different, like something has shifted underneath." I didn't say anything dramatic, I just nodded. But inside I knew what he was describing. He was describing a body that had stopped being in a state of low-grade emergency. He was describing the kind of internal climate where repair becomes possible again. Not because he had fixed the disease, we hadn't, The gene was still there, the body was still vulnerable, but the conditions had changed. And the information being read by his cells had changed, and the cells were responding. We could see it, and he could feel it. I want to tell you about the moment I understood that what I was learning and what was working for him was not a private project anymore. It happened almost by accident. A friend of ours, a woman around our age, had been struggling for years with what she's described as just being tired all the time. She had been to multiple doctors. They had run blood work. They had checked her thyroid, her hormones, and they had told her, "You're fine, this is just stress. Maybe try meditation." She and I were having coffee, and she was telling me about it. And without thinking, I started asking her questions. Not the questions a regular doctor asks. Questions about her sleep, about her stress, her food, supplementation, environmental load, her cycle, about the specific things her body was telling her. I was asking the questions I was now trained to ask. And by the end of that conversation, I had a pretty clear picture of what was probably happening with her. And I told her, "Would you let me look at your situation more carefully? I cannot promise anything, but I think there are things you have not been asked about that matter." And she said yes. We worked together informally for a few weeks. I gave her some basic recommendations: sleep, food, 2 specific nutrients she was almost certainly low in based on her symptoms, a simple nervous system practice, nothing exotic or dramatic. 3 months later, she sent me a long message. She had energy again, real energy, the kind of energy she hadn't felt since her 20s, and she was sleeping deeply. She had clarity, and she had patience with her kids. So she felt like she had her life back. And then she said something that shifted my whole world. She said, "Why did no doctor ever ask me any of those questions? Why did I have to wait for a friend who happened to learn this on the side? Why is this not standard?" I didn't have a good answer for her. I still don't. The honest answer is that the medical system is built around treating disease once it has crossed certain thresholds. The medical system is not built in most countries around the work of asking the right questions early. So must people fall through the gaps. Smart people, educated people, people who can afford the best doctors, they still fall through. After her, more people started coming. A relative, a neighbor, a patient at the practice who had heard somehow. Each one had been to multiple doctors. Each one had been told they were fine, or that there was nothing to do, or that they should just take some meds. And in almost every case, when I asked the questions I had been trained to ask, there was something the system had missed, and we could work with. I want to be careful here, because I'm not a wonder healer, and I've never claimed to be. I do not promise any miracles. What I do is apply patiently and with attention the science of how the body actually works. Most of what I do is not magic. It is targeted, specific, and based on research. The reason it might look like magic is only because the standard of care so rarely involves any of it. And somewhere in those months, With my husband stabilizing and other people improving, I realized something I had been avoiding. The realization was that I couldn't unsee this. I couldn't go back running a dental practice as if I didn't now know what I knew. I couldn't look at people who came to me, friends or otherwise, and shrug and send them back into a system that was going to fail them in the same way it had almost failed us. I had crossed the line. I just didn't know yet what was on the other side of the line. So that's where I want to leave you today. With me, with the laptop still, but now also with people calling, people asking, wanting help. With a husband whose body is quietly responding, blood values coming down, and tremor fading. With a marriage that has somehow started talking again, properly talking, the way two people talk when they realize they have been almost lost each other. Next week, I want to take you inside the decision that came out of all of this. The decision to leave Bavaria, even Germany. The decision to sell our businesses, our house. The decision to take our 2 daughters and move halfway around the world to a city we had visited maybe 3 times before. The decision that everyone in our lives, including some of our closest friends, thought it was insane, and for us it was not. It was the only honest response to what we had learned, and it became the most important external change of our lives. I'll tell you why. If today's episode hit you, if you ever had the experience of being told you are fine when you know you are not, or watching a loved one be dismissed by a system that has decided they have nothing left to offer, please share this episode with someone who needs it. Thank you for being here. I see you next Tuesday, because health is a choice.